A mother and her 3 children nearly freeze to death in a blizzard until a recluse pulls them from the edge. But shelter isn't safety. What they're running from and what they're hiding might be deadlier than the storm. The boy wasn't. Breathing. That was the first thing Elias Ward saw as he yanked open the cabin door, half blind from the storm. A woman stumbled forward with 3 children clinging to her. One collapsed, face down in the snow, too small to leave prints. Elias caught him before his head hit the porch. "Get inside," he barked. The woman didn't argue. She all but dragged, the other 2 in behind her. And the moment the door slammed shut, silence swallowed the storm. But the cold stayed on them like rot. Elias didn't waste time with questions. He laid the boy out on the bearskin rug near the fire, fingers all ready, searching for a pulse. The child's lips were blue, his limbs stiff. The woman dropped beside him, sobbing out his name. "Micah, baby, come on. Stay with me, please." "Quiet," Elias snapped. His voice was hoarse from disuse, but it cut through the panic. "He needs heat, not noise." She flinched, but obeyed. She gathered the other 2 closer. A girl maybe 10, a boy slightly older. Both pale, both trembling. Elias stripped his coat, wrapped it around the smallest one, and got to work. Friction, warmth, pressure to the chest, murmured words, even though he hadn't prayed in 20 years. And then, a cough. It was wet and feeble, but it was sound. Elias exhaled sharp through his nose, not relief exactly, but the edge of it. The boy's eyes fluttered. The mother made a strangled sound and grabbed him, sobbing now in earnest. Elias stood, walked to the stove, poured hot water from the kettle into a mug. "Drink," he said, handing it to the woman. "You all look half dead." She didn't even hesitate, just reached with shaking hands and said, "Thank you," like it hurt her to say it. The boy in her lap shivered again, this time from life, not death. Elias crouched before the 2 other children. "Names." The older boy squared his shoulders. "I'm Caleb, that's Ruth. Micah's the little one." Their mother added, "I'm Miriam." Elias nodded. "Elias Ward, this is my land, my home, and right now, it's yours too." Her eyes flooded again, but she blinked it back. "We didn't mean to trespass. Our wagon, there was a tree in the road and the horses panicked. We tried to walk back toward town, got turned around." Elias didn't answer. He just stared at her for a long beat. Snow still clung to her lashes. Her boots were torn. The children's clothes weren't thick enough for spring, let alone a storm like this. "How long were you out there?" "Since yesterday." He looked away, jaw clenched. That meant they'd been walking over 24 hours in whiteout conditions. That they'd survived at all was a miracle or something else. "You're lucky you found me," he muttered. "No," Miriam whispered. "We weren't lucky. We were desperate." Elias didn't ask what she meant. Not yet. He had questions, like why none of them carried supplies. Why there were bruises blooming beneath Miriam's collar. Why the girl? Ruth flinched at every sharp sound. But those weren't for tonight. Not while they were still half frozen, still clinging to the edge. Instead, he made soup. It wasn't much, just potatoes and dried herbs, but the kids devoured it like it was gold. Ruth sat close to her mother but kept glancing toward Elias with wary eyes. Caleb stayed by the window, watching the storm ease off in cautious increments. Night fell. The snow didn't stop, but it softened. By the firelight, Elias noticed more. The way Miriam's hands trembled when she thought no one was watching. The way Caleb kept his back to the wall, like he expected someone to burst through the door at any moment. These weren't just travelers caught in bad weather. They were running. He waited until the children slept before he said it aloud. "You're not from here." Miriam didn't deny it. She sat on the edge of the cot, one hand still on Micah's back. "We came from Ridgewell. We were supposed to stop in Fenbrook. But then..." Her voice trailed off. Elias leaned forward. "But then..." "What?" She looked at him, really looked, not with thanks, not with fear, with calculation. She was weighing whether she could trust him. Finally, she said, "He found us." "Who?" "My husband." Elias didn't speak. Miriam's jaw set. He's not what you'd call a good man. We ran. We've been running for months. He wasn't supposed to know where we were anymore." Elias's face didn't change, but his voice dropped low. "Is he looking?" "Yes." "Does he know you're out here?" "I don't know." Elias stood, went to the door, checked the lock. His cabin had thick walls, reinforced hinges. Not much got through unless he wanted it to. But men like her husband, they didn't wait. "For permission." "Then you're staying here," he said flatly. Miriam blinked. "We can't impose—" "You're not," Elias snapped. "And if he shows up, he won't make it past the trees." That stopped her. "You'd risk that?" Elias looked at her, then at the sleeping children. "I've lost people before," he said. "I don't plan to lose any more." The silence that followed felt like a contract. Neither of them said anything else. But as the wind howled beyond the cabin walls, Elias watched the flames flicker, and he knew this wasn't over, not even close. Whatever secret Miriam carried, it hadn't caught up to them yet, but it would. Elias didn't sleep, not really. He kept to the chair by the window, long rifle leaned against the wall within reach, eyes scanning the dark beyond the frostbitten glass. The children were safe, curled under wool blankets near the hearth, their soft breaths the only sound inside the cabin. But something gnawed at him. Something beneath the woman's words, in the stiffness of her posture, in the twitch of Caleb's shoulders even in sleep. Ridgewell. He remembered that town. 6 days' ride southeast, near the edge of the pass. Nothing much to it, just a mining strip, 2 saloons, a church, and a graveyard that filled too fast. He hadn't passed through in years. Last he heard, they'd hung a sheriff for taking bribes. It wasn't a place a woman like Miriam would have landed by choice. The fire hissed low, and Elias tossed another log in. Dawn was still hours off when Caleb stirred. He sat up slow, rubbing his eyes, blinking into the shadows. Elias kept his voice, soft. "Couldn't sleep?" The boy tensed, then nodded. "Didn't mean to wake you." "You didn't." Elias reached beside him and poured a tin cup of water, held it out. "Drink." Caleb accepted it but didn't move closer. He sipped and stared down into the cup, as if it might whisper answers. "Your mother says you've been running," Elias said. Caleb flinched, just a twitch, but enough. "She shouldn't have told you," he mumbled. "It makes trouble." Elias leaned forward, resting forearms on his knees. "You think I don't know what trouble looks like?" Caleb's eyes rose to meet his, and there was a haunted weight behind them, far too heavy for a boy that age. "I think you know exactly what it looks like. That's why you're out here. Smart, observant, hardened too fast." Elias saw too much of himself in the boy. He sat back, stretching his long legs out toward the coals. "Trouble comes, whether you speak it aloud or not. Best be ready when it does." Caleb looked away. "We tried to hide. Mama dyed her hair, said if we just stayed moving he wouldn't catch us. But he did." Caleb nodded. "You think he followed you through that storm?" "I think he follows us through everything." That stuck with Elias. He stood and pulled the heavy bearskin curtain aside. The sky outside was a blue-grey bruise. The blizzard had lost its bite sometime during the night, but snow still fell in lazy sheets, and the drifts were already waist-high in places. No one would have made it far in that. And yet, something deep in Elias stirred. He knew the kind of man who'd chase his family into a blizzard. He'd met them in saloons, in back alleys, in quiet corners of towns that left no footprints, the kind who wore God on their lips and blood on their hands, who broke bones and spirits with the same ease, who'd burn a home just to warm their rage. Elias had ridden with worse and ridden against them. He didn't ask more. Caleb didn't volunteer. But when the boy finally drifted back to sleep, Elias sat watching the snow, and something in his gut said this peace wouldn't last. Not with secrets like theirs. By morning, the storm was dying, but the silence it left behind felt like a held breath. Miriam moved like her bones were made of glass. She folded blankets, helped Ruth tie her boots, kept Micah close to her side at all times. Her voice never rose, her gaze never lingered. She thanked Elias for the firewood, thanked him for the bread, thanked him like a woman waiting to be turned away. Elias didn't. He handed her another mug of hot water, and when her fingers brushed his, she flinched. Not from heat, but from habit. "You were planning to stay in Fenbrook?" he asked. She hesitated. "We heard it was small, quiet." "It is, but it's close enough to Ridgewell for word to spread." Her jaw tightened. "We didn't plan to stop, just pass through. I have a cousin out west. We were headed there." Elias nodded slowly. "You figure he'll stop looking once you're far enough?" She didn't answer right away. "I figured if we made it to spring, we'd have a chance." "You think winter would kill him?" "No," she said, eyes flashing. "I think it'd kill us first." That silenced him. The children had gone outside, Caleb leading the way with a rusted tin pail, Ruth trying to catch snowflakes on her tongue, Micah bundled like a papoose. Elias watched them through the window, heart tugging against his ribs. He didn't know these children, but something in him stirred all the same, like old bones remembering what it meant to belong. Later, as he chopped wood behind the cabin, Ruth came up beside him. She said nothing, just stood there a few feet back, clutching a stick she'd carved into the shape of a bird. "You okay?" Elias asked. She nodded, silent. "You talk at all?" Another nod. He paused in his swing, wiped sweat from his brow despite the chill. "You made that bird." She offered it to him. "For Micah, but he dropped it when we ran. I made another one." Elias turned it over in his hand. It was crude, but delicate, sharp wings, eyes etched with the point of a knife. "You're good at this. My grandpa taught me." Elias crouched to her height. "Was he your mother's father?" She looked away. "He's dead now, like Grandma. Mama says we carry their names." "That's a heavy thing to carry." She nodded again, this time slower. "You carry names too?" Elias didn't answer. But that night, as the children slept again and Miriam washed their few clothes by the stove, she asked quietly, "Why did you really take us in?" Elias stared at the fire. "You knocked." A lot of folks wouldn't have answered. "I'm not most folks." She studied him. "You don't talk much about yourself." "I don't talk much, period." "You live here alone?" "I prefer it that way." "And yet you opened your door to 4 strangers." "I saw a boy dying on my porch. That's not something you ignore." She looked down at her hands. "I used to believe in kindness, but I've learned better. You can believe in it again." "Not without cost," she said bitterly. "Kindness has a price, always." He turned toward her then. "So does cruelty. You just don't always see the debt until it's due." Her eyes met his, and for the first time, she didn't look afraid, just tired. By the 3rd day, Micah was laughing again. Ruth carved more birds. Caleb began checking the traps Elias had set along the tree line. Miriam cooked when she could, cleaned when she couldn't, and sat by the fire long into the night. Elias should have told them to leave. The storm had cleared. They had daylight. The road to Fenbrook would be passable soon, but something in him twisted at the thought. The cabin felt warmer with them in it, less like a tomb, less like punishment. That night, he sat with Caleb outside, oil lamp burning low between them. "You trust me?" Elias asked. Caleb didn't answer right away. "I think I do." "Good. Then tell me the truth." Caleb's hands tightened. About what? Your father. The boy was quiet for so long, Elias thought he'd walk away. But then he said, voice hollow, he's not my father. Elias blinked. He's not. He married Mama after Micah was born. Said he'd take care of us. Said God sent him to redeem her. Elias's stomach turned. He hurt her? He asked. Caleb's mouth tightened. He hurt all of us. Elias looked away, into the trees. Snow creaked under some distant weight, just a branch shifting. Probably. He doesn't want us back, Caleb said. He just doesn't want her free. That, Elias understood. That kind of man didn't chase out of love. He hunted to own, to punish. And Elias knew now, if the storm hadn't stopped him, he'd come, sooner or later. The kind of evil that drives a man like that didn't freeze easy, and when he did come, it wouldn't be at the door. It'd be through fire and wood, through blood and bone. Elias rose. Tell your mother to keep the children in tomorrow, and if she hears my rifle, she doesn't open the door for anyone. Not even you, Caleb asked. Especially not me. Because Elias Ward knew what kind of man came for people he claimed to love, and he knew how far a man had to go to stop him. The next morning, the sky was too still. It was that kind of quiet Elias had learned to fear. Not the gentle hush of peace, but the aching silence before the world split open. A kind of silence that only existed when something unnatural moved through it. The snow had crusted into sharp ridges overnight, and the air carried a glassy edge that sliced the lungs on inhale. Elias stood just past the front stoop, boots crunching into the drift, his rifle slung across his back, his revolver snug at his hip. He scanned the woods in every direction, the pine branches heavy with frost. There was no movement, no tracks, not even from deer. And yet, something was wrong. He felt it in his bones, like a memory trying to resurface, or a wound that ached before the rain. Inside, Miriam did as she was told. She kept the children by the hearth, the door barred, and the curtains drawn. Caleb sat with his back to the wall, a knife clutched in one hand, the same bird Ruth had carved tucked in his pocket. Ruth didn't ask questions. She clung to her mother's waist like the wind might steal her if she let go. Micah, too young to understand, simply played with a square of cloth and muttered to himself. Miriam whispered prayers under her breath, though she didn't know if they were for safety or for the strength to do what she might be forced to. Elias walked the perimeter of the cabin every hour. He circled slow, deliberate, watchful. Once, he found a hare carcass snagged in the trap. Line, its neck broken clean but no blood spilled. The trap hadn't done that. Something else had. He didn't say a word, just reset the trap, wiped the wire clean, and moved on. By mid-afternoon, the air changed. The sky darkened, not from cloud, but from something heavier, like the sun itself, was holding its breath. That's when he heard it. Hooves on one set, heavy, deliberate, coming up the eastern slope where the trees thinned into an old creek bed, a path no decent man would take alone in winter, unless he wasn't afraid, or unless he was angry enough not to care. Elias stood motionless between the trees, eyes locked on the narrow pass, and then he saw him. The man was tall, broad-shouldered, wrapped in a dark duster stiff with ice. His hat was low over his brow, beard frosted to his jaw, and his horse, black, lean, and twitching, looked as mean as he did. He rode slow, like he had all the time in the world. Elias didn't move. Didn't draw. Not yet. The man dismounted without a word, tied his horse to a dead pine, looked around once, then turned and started walking straight toward the cabin. Elias stepped out from the trees. "That's far enough," he said, voice like gravel. The man stopped. His eyes met Elias's without fear, just cold recognition. "You, the one keeping them?" he asked. Elias didn't blink. "You lost." "They're mine." "No," Elias said, and cocked the rifle. "They're not." A flicker of something, Surprise, maybe, crossed the man's face, but it passed quick. You don't know what she is. I know what you are. The man smiled, teeth like chipped stone. You think you're the first fool she's run to, the first sorry soul who thinks he can save her. Elias's finger slid to the trigger. She doesn't need saving, you just need leaving. That smile widened. You think you scare me? No, Elias said. I don't think you scare anyone anymore. That did it. The man moved, fast. His hand went for the pistol at his belt, but Elias was faster. One shot cracked through the trees, not at the man, at the snowbank just in front of him. The powder burst sent snow spraying up into the man's face, and he stumbled back, half blind. Next one's for your knee, Elias said. Third one's for your neck. You won't get a fourth. The man froze, breathing hard, hat crooked now, gun still half holstered, and for a second, Elias thought maybe he'd turn around, but instead, the man laughed. You got no idea what you just stepped into, he said, voice bitter with venom. She didn't tell you everything. She didn't need to. She's a liar. She's always been a liar. Elias narrowed his eyes. Even if that were true, I'd still take her word over yours. The man spat in the snow. I'll be back, he said, backing away now. You can count on that. Elias followed him with his sights until he mounted the horse and vanished back through the trees. But something told him he wouldn't wait long. He stepped back into the cabin without a word. Miriam looked up from where she sat, face pale, arms wrapped tight around Micah. You saw him, she asked, already knowing. Elias nodded. He'll come back, not today, but soon. Caleb rose. We'll leave. No, Elias said. He'll just follow you again. Then what do we do? Elias looked at each of them. We prepare. The next 3 days passed like slow thunder. Elias dug trenches around the cabin, reinforced the shutters with nailed slats, set tripwires through the trees, baited false trails with boot tracks, taught Caleb to reload and Ruth to signal danger with bird calls. Miriam cleaned his spare revolver without being asked. It wasn't enough, but it was all they could do. The waiting was worse than the storm. Every creak of wood, every gust of wind, every shadow that passed the windows sent their hearts racing. On the 4th night, Caleb finally asked the question no one wanted to say out loud. What happens if he doesn't come alone? Elias looked up from where he was oiling the rifle. Then we stand together. You're just one man. Elias set the rifle down. Once, I was part of 23, he said quietly. Long riders, raiders, thieves, if we're being honest. Rode from Colorado to New Mexico with nothing but bullets and whiskey. Caleb blinked. You were an outlaw. I was worse than that. Ruth gasped softly. Miriam didn't move. Elias nodded. I know men like him because I used to ride with them. I used to be them. So why'd you stop? Caleb asked. Elias looked toward the window, and for a long moment, he didn't speak. Then, because one day, I watched a man put a gun in a child's mouth to make her mother talk, and I realized I couldn't live another day where that was considered a tactic instead of a horror. No one said anything after that, but something shifted in the room. Not fear, not pity, something closer to belief. It was the 6th night when they saw the fire. Far off in the woods, just a flicker, a camp maybe, or a signal. Elias watched it from the roof, breath fogging in the cold, fingers clenched tight around the scope. It was too far to shoot, too far to see who it was for sure. But the horse tracks around it were fresh, multiple. He's not alone, Elias said, and everyone knew what that meant. They came at dawn. 3 men, 1 woman. Horses lean and fast. They didn't come quiet. They wanted to be seen, wanted to rattle them. But Elias had been ready. The first tripwire set off a bear banger that sent 2 of the horses rearing. One rider was thrown. Elias dropped, him with a shot to the leg before the others knew what hit them. The next man tried to flank from the south, but Caleb, shaking and sweating, managed to fire a warning shot that spooked him into the trench. He didn't climb back out. Only the leader kept coming. The one with the frost-rimed beard. He didn't flinch, didn't shout, just rode straight to the front of the cabin like death itself. Elias met him halfway. No cover, no tricks. Just man too. Man, guns in hand. You should have let them die in that storm, the man said. Elias didn't reply. The man drew, and Elias shot him through the stomach before the barrel cleared his holster. He dropped, hard. Snow went red beneath him. But, still, he laughed. You think it ends with me? He gasped, coughing blood. Elias stepped closer. You think I don't have more? Elias knelt beside him. Maybe you do, he said quietly. But you won't live to see it. And the man smiled one last time before the life left his eyes. When it was over, the woods were quiet again. Ruth helped carry the ammunition inside. Miriam cleaned the blood from Elias's shoulder. Caleb dragged one of the horses into the barn. None of them said much, because they all knew it wasn't over. Not yet. There was still the secret. The one none of them had spoken aloud. The one Miriam had kept even from Elias. And as night fell again over the cabin, and the storm began to howl once more, she finally turned to him with eyes wide and fearful. There's something I didn't tell you, she said, and Elias, exhausted and braced for another storm, simply nodded once. Then tell me now. The fire cracked low in the hearth, casting long, twitching shadows across the log walls. Miriam stood near it, arms folded tightly over her chest, like the weight of what she hadn't said might buckle her spine if she dared let go. Elias sat at the table, rifle across his knees, not because he was expecting a fight, but because the fight had become a part of him now. He didn't flinch when she said the words. I wasn't trying to hide it. Not from you. I didn't think we'd make it this far. He gave no reaction. Just waited. She hesitated, eyes flicking to the stairs where the children slept. Ruth and Caleb. They're not mine. Not by blood. Elias raised an eyebrow but said nothing. She continued. I was working in the outskirts of Bannock when I first met them. Their mother, Dinah, was a friend. Not close, but kind. She had 3 children, all under 10, and a husband meaner than the devil drunk. Nobody did anything, even when she came to town with bruises you couldn't explain. That's just the way it was. Elias didn't interrupt. His gaze stayed fixed, steady, like he knew the story wasn't truly about Dinah. One night, she came to my door with her youngest, Micah, barely born. Blood in her hair, said her husband. Had snapped, shot the dog, said she knew she was next, asked me to take the children, hide them. She didn't care what happened to her. And you did, Elias asked quietly. I tried. I took them out the back way, rode half the night through sleet. The plan was to head south, cross into Wyoming territory, start new. But he caught up. Dinah's husband, her voice faltered, but Elias didn't speak. He let the silence do what it was supposed to, make room for the truth. He wasn't alone, she said, swallowing hard. He brought others, friends, the kind of men who'd rather watch a house burn than light. A lamp. They surrounded us outside a church west of the divide. I told Ruth and Caleb to run, and I made a stand. Her hand went to the scar just beneath her collarbone, the one Elias had noticed when she'd first changed into the dry flannel shirt he gave her. They left me for dead. What happened to Dinah? Elias asked. Her eyes clouded. She went back for her husband. Said if she didn't, more women would end up like her. Last I heard, she disappeared near Fort Laramie. No body, no grave. Elias leaned back, his knuckles white around the stock of the rifle. You took in those kids like your own. They are my own, she said quickly, fiercely. I fed them, I taught them, I fought for them. Caleb won't even speak her name anymore. Ruth. She remembers, but she won't talk about it. And Micah, he just thinks I'm Mama. He was barely out of swaddling when I took him. Elias nodded slowly. So who were those men we shot? His friends? Maybe, she said. Or worse. If he's gone, others might have taken it personal. Some of them rode for a man named Coe, Reuben Coe. At that, Elias stiffened. He knew that name. Everybody west of the Missouri had heard it whispered like a hex. Coe didn't ride for money. He rode for the pleasure of turning something good into ash. Used to say every honest thing in this world needed reminding how fragile it really was. Then, we've got trouble, Elias murmured. Real trouble. Miriam nodded once. I never meant to drag you into this. You didn't, he said, almost too softly. She looked at him. You stepped in that night because you saw us freezing, but you could have left the next morning. You didn't. He looked down. Because there's something about this, about you, that I've seen before. She tilted her head, unsure. My wife, he said. Caroline. She took in a boy once, one who wandered into our camp, half dead. Didn't have a lick of kin left. She made room for him, fed him, named him Jacob. 2 years later, she died shielding him when a bounty gang came through and didn't like how we said no. Miriam's hand hovered over the back of his chair, uncertain. He survived? She asked. Elias looked toward the flames. He ran. Did you find him? I stopped looking after a while. Not because I gave up, because I didn't want to find him dead. She didn't press further, just stood beside him for a while, both of them staring into the orange light like it might show them something the dark never could. The next morning brought news. Smoke. Thin, distant, curling into the sky just beyond the ridge. Ruth spotted it first while feeding the hens. Elias was already halfway to the barn when she called out. He took one look, and his stomach dropped. That's not campfire smoke, he said grimly. That's a burn. What's over there? Caleb asked. Elias looked at Miriam. Tell them to get packed. Why? What's happening? They're not hunting us. They're sending a message. He saddled the mare fast, rode hard through the frost-laced brush, and crested the rise to where the smoke came thickest. What he found turned his stomach. It was a farmhouse, or what used to be one. The barn was blackened, smouldering timber collapsed, in on itself. The main house still stood, but only just. The door was wide open, swinging on one hinge. No livestock, no wagons, no survivors. The walls had been painted in blood. Across the side of the house, scrawled in large crooked letters, "We see you." Elias's jaw clenched so tight he heard something crack. He rode back without delay. They're getting bolder, he said when he dismounted. They want us to run. Will we? Miriam asked. No. But what if we run now, we leave a trail a blind man could follow? They'll find us in days. No cover, no help. Here we've got walls, tools, distance, and me. He didn't mean it as pride. It was just truth. They spent the rest of the day fortifying. Elias fashioned spears from rake handles. Caleb sharpened knives until his hands blistered. Miriam boiled snow to wash the wounds they hadn't noticed until the adrenaline faded. That night, Micah cried in his sleep. He kept muttering one name. Daddy. Miriam froze. I thought, he was too young, she whispered, brushing his hair back. But he remembers something. Maybe not his face, just his voice. Caleb didn't speak, but the way he turned his back to the room said enough. Ruth, however, sat beside her mother and asked, Do we have to keep running forever? No, Miriam said firmly, and looked across the room to Elias. We're not running anymore. The next morning, they awoke to silence. Not peace, just stillness. Too complete. Elias stepped outside to find fresh tracks. Boot prints, 5 sets, circled the cabin, then doubled back. They were being watched and stalked, which meant one thing. The next attack wouldn't be a charge. It would be slow, surgical, mean. "They're trying to bleed us out," Elias said. "Like wolves, cornering a buck. Break our nerves before they break our walls." "What do we do?" Caleb asked. "We bring the fight to them." That night, Elias left under cover of dark, told Miriam he'd be back by dawn. Ruth watched him go from the window, clutching her little wooden bird. Miriam didn't sleep. Not once. She sat in a chair near the fire, revolver on her lap, one eye on the door. When the sun rose, he returned, with blood on his coat and not his own. "They're camped a mile west. I dropped 2 of them before the others even drew breath. Left something behind they'll think is important." "What did you leave?" Caleb asked. Elias smirked darkly. "My old outlaw brand. Burned into a plank. They'll think it's a warning." Caleb blinked. "You were branded?" "Every man who rode under Clay Garrison was. Right shoulder. It made us more loyal than a name ever could." "You think they'll come harder now?" "I'm counting on it." Miriam watched him clean the blood from his hands at the basin, and for the first time since this began, she felt it. Not hope, exactly, but the thing that comes before it. Possibility. Because she realized something no one had said aloud. Elias wasn't just fighting for them. He was trying to make something right. By that evening, the winds began to rise again. Another storm rolled in, but this one wasn't of snow. It was hoofbeats. They came just as the light began to fade, shadows against the storm clouds. Elias counted 6, 2 with rifles, 1 with a scar across his jaw, another with a limp. Ko wasn't among them, not yet, but his dogs were, and they brought torches. From the loft window, Ruth gasped. "Fire!" she said, voice shaking. Elias didn't blink. He lit the oil lamps, double-checked the hammer on his rifle, and looked toward Miriam. "However this ends," he said, "you made the right choice." She nodded, but her hand trembled as she reached for the revolver. He knelt down beside Caleb and pressed something into the boy's palm. It was a bullet, but not just any bullet. It had a name scratched into it. Reuben Ko. Caleb looked up, wide-eyed. "For him," Elias said simply. "When the time comes." The men outside shouted demands. "Send the girl out and we let the rest walk." They didn't reply. A shot cracked. Glass shattered. Micah screamed. Elias pulled the boy. Down, shielded him. The siege had begun, and every moment that followed was chaos. The first bullet lodged in the mantel above the hearth, spitting dust and bits of stone into Elias's cheek as he pulled Micah to the floor. Miriam shouted, but he couldn't hear her clearly. Not over the way the cabin roared to life with gunfire and glass and flame. "Down!" Elias barked, voice sharp, commanding. "Everyone down!" Another shot shattered the lamp by the window. The sudden darkness made everything flicker, half alive in firelight and shadows. Miriam crouched low, grabbing Micah and crawling behind the overturned table. Ruth scrambled beside her, shaking, but silent. Caleb stayed near the far wall, clutching the rifle Elias had handed him that morning, knuckles white around the stock. They were boxed in, outnumbered, surrounded, and Elias. He looked calm, not because he wasn't afraid, but because he'd lived through worse. He slid across the floor to the front window and peered through the broken edge, watching the torchlight outside twist like snakes in the wind. 6 men, no more, not yet. He recognized one. The scarred man who'd tried to flank him the night before. The others were younger, cocky. That would be their mistake. "They'll push harder next," Elias muttered, mostly to himself. "Try to flush us out." He was right. Minutes later, a bottle flew through the broken window, glass, rag, fire, and landed in the middle of the room with a terrible, blooming roar. "Back!" he shouted. The flames leapt fast. Miriam grabbed a wool blanket from the bench and smothered, the worst of it while Elias fired 2 rounds through the window. One of the men cried out. Another ducked. It was working, they were getting sloppy. Caleb rose up too fast, fired wildly. "Caleb, down!" Elias shouted, but the boy didn't hear. A shot rang back. Caleb's shoulder jerked hard, and he fell with a grunt. Miriam screamed. Ruth froze. Elias scrambled to him, dragging him back by the collar while bullets splintered the wall above their heads. "He's all right," Elias muttered, yanking Caleb's coat open. "Through and through. Hurts like hell, but you'll keep your arm." The boy nodded, teeth gritted, pale but breathing. Miriam pressed cloth to the wound while Elias turned to Ruth. "You know the crawl space?" She nodded, eyes wide. "Get your brother under there. Keep him quiet." "But Mama, I'll be fine," Miriam said, not looking at her. "Go!" The girl obeyed. Quiet, quick. Not a tear. Elias rose again, fired once, twice, hit someone. He heard the shout, but they kept coming. Outside, a voice bellowed. "Last chance, Ren. Send out the girl." Miriam froze. Elias turned toward her. "Ren!" She didn't speak. The voice called again. "Don't make us drag her out screaming. You know who's coming next." And then she understood. They weren't after her. They were after Ruth. Miriam stood slowly. The revolver was still in her hand. The room flickered with firelight, and for a moment, Elias thought she might walk out there and give herself up. Instead, she spoke quietly. "I lied." Elias didn't respond. He waited. "She's not Dinah's." That stunned him. Miriam's voice trembled, but she kept speaking. "She's Reuben Coe's daughter." "What?" "Dinah told me the truth just before she went back. Ruth's real mother was a farmhand's daughter, barely 16. Coe took her, used her, then dumped her, pregnant and alone. Dinah met her on the road years later and took Ruth in." Elias stared at her, piecing it together. "That's why they want her." Miriam nodded. Coe didn't know. Not at first, but someone must have told him. Now he wants to claim her, or kill her. Either way, he doesn't want her raised by someone like me. Elias's jaw clenched. "And you raised her anyway." "She's the best thing I ever did." Outside, hooves approached. He heard the heavy gait, the slow, deliberate dismount. Reuben Coe had arrived. Elias turned to Miriam. "You need to hide." "No. If they take you, the kids won't survive. But if we hold long enough, maybe I can—" I said no. He stopped, looked her in the eye, and saw it then. Not weakness, not fear, conviction. She wasn't going anywhere. Another voice came from outside. Smooth, confident, drenched in poison. Elias Harlan. "You're still alive somehow." Elias moved to the broken window and called back. "Didn't expect to see your face again, Coe." The laugh that came chilled the room. "You know me. I like to finish what I start. You started nothing but misery, and you ran from it. Thought burying yourself in the snow would make you clean." Elias grit his teeth. "You left bodies across Wyoming, Coe. Men, women, children. You think a name gives you the right." "It gives me blood," Coe said. "And Ruth is mine." "She's not a thing you get to claim. I'm not asking." Elias turned to Miriam. She looked ready, beyond ready. "You think he'll come in himself?" she asked. "No," Elias said. "He sends others first, like always. Lets them bleed before he lifts a finger. Then we bleed him first." Elias felt something shift in him, not just admiration, but awe. The woman before him wasn't just brave. She was carved from steel. They took up positions. The next hour became a blur. Shots through walls, smoke from the roofline. A horse screamed and bucked outside. Elias fired until his rifle clicked dry, then grabbed the shotgun from the corner. Miriam never missed once. Ruth and Micah didn't make a sound from the crawl space, though once he thought he heard Micah whispering prayers. Caleb stayed conscious, pale, sweating, but alive. And then the noise stopped. Silence again. Elias waited, heart pounding. A single figure approached the door. Alone, Reuben Coe, tall, broad-shouldered, white coat dusted with snow, a pistol in one hand, cigar in the other. Calm as a banker on a Sunday, he stepped through the shattered doorway, unbothered by the bodies behind him. "I could burn this place," he said, looking around. "But you'd only die screaming." Elias aimed the shotgun. "Try." Ko chuckled. "I don't want her hurt, Elias. Just back where she belongs." "She belongs with her family." Ko's smile soured. "That woman," he said, jerking his chin toward Miriam. "You think she's family? She's more than you'll ever be." Ko stepped forward. "She's a thief, took what's mine. She saved what you threw away." A beat passed. Then Ko aimed the pistol at Miriam. Ruth stepped from the crawl space. "No!" the girl shouted. Elias's stomach dropped. "Mama's not a thief." Miriam turned, her face stricken. "Ruth, get back!" But it was too late. Ko turned his aim to the child and fired. Elias moved before he could think, knocked Ruth aside, took the bullet in the side. The force dropped him to his knees. Caleb screamed. Miriam raised her gun and shot Reuben Ko clean through the heart. He staggered back, eyes wide, looked down at the blood blooming on his coat like a red sun rising, then fell. Dead. Miriam dropped the revolver. Ruth ran to Elias, sobbing. He blinked up at the ceiling. The snow had started to fall again, soft, cold, but somehow peaceful. "I'm all right," he rasped. "Just need a minute." Miriam dropped beside him, pulling open his coat. The wound wasn't clean. The bleeding wouldn't stop. He gripped her wrist. "Don't let them be afraid." "You're not dying," he smiled faintly. "I've done worse," but he wasn't sure. Not this time. Not with the blood soaking his shirt, spreading warm across the floor. Miriam called for cloth, for water. Ruth held his hand. Micah crawled out, quiet and blinking. Caleb stood, one arm limp, but moved with purpose. And as Elias drifted, he heard voices. Not the kind that came from outside, but ones from the past. Caroline, laughing. Jacob, shouting. He wasn't ready to go yet, but if he did, he knew he'd done something good, at last. Elias woke to the smell of snow, wet fabric, scorched wood, and the faintest trace of gunpowder lingering like a ghost in the rafters. He wasn't dead. That was the first thing he realized. The pain in his side was too loud for death. And the second thing, he wasn't alone. Micah's small hand was wrapped tightly around his fingers, like the boy had fallen asleep that way and hadn't let go once. Elias turned his head. Miriam sat in a chair beside the bed. Her hair was down, eyes bloodshot but wide awake. She didn't flinch when he stirred, just leaned forward and said softly, "You're not dying. You understand me?" He wanted to answer, but couldn't yet. The ache in his ribs swallowed most of his breath. Bandages stretched tight over his torso, clean ones, fresh linens, firewood stacked beside the stove. Caleb's coat hung from the peg above, a fresh stitch along the shoulder. Someone had done all that while he slept. "I've been changing your bandages every 4 hours," Miriam said, eyes not leaving his face. "Boiling snow, keeping the wound clean. You were out for nearly 2 days. 2 days." He shifted slightly and caught a flash of movement. Ruth. She was perched in the corner, blanket wrapped around her, eyes watchful and hollow. She looked older somehow, not in age, but in the way kids do when they've seen something. They shouldn't have and can't forget it. "She hasn't said much," Miriam added quietly. "But she wouldn't leave your side." "Is everyone all right?" he rasped. Miriam nodded. "We buried the men behind the ridge. Ko too." Elias raised an eyebrow. "I didn't want to," she admitted. "But Ruth asked me to. Said it. Didn't matter what he did. He was still her father." Elias looked toward the girl. She didn't speak, just held his gaze for a long moment and then turned back to the window, watching snow pile gently on the sill. There's more, Miriam said. Her voice dropped, and her fingers curled slightly against her lap. Elias waited. The letter in Co's coat, she whispered. He'd been writing to someone. Regularly. It wasn't just about Ruth. Who? A man in Cheyenne, banker from the sound of it. They had plans to sell land, lots of it. I think he wanted to use Ruth as leverage, claim her as a blood heir, inherit the estates. So it wasn't about her, it was about what she stood in the way of. Miriam nodded. And now he's dead, and whoever he was writing to, well, they'll come looking eventually. Elias closed his eyes. Of course they will. Which is why we have to go, she said, her voice firmer now. When the snow clears, we leave this place. We take only what we can carry, no wagon, just horses, and we ride west. To where? I don't know, she admitted, but somewhere warmer, safer, someplace Ruth can grow up without wondering who's watching. And you? She blinked. What about me? You think running again is safer for you too? Miriam didn't answer. Elias tried to sit up. The pain returned like a hot nail under his ribs, but he gritted his teeth and swung his legs over the side. The cabin creaked. Outside, the wind howled low, restless. I know what it's like, he said after a pause. Running, never planting roots, always watching your back. Then you understand why we have to. He nodded slowly. But I also know something else, he added. Running doesn't keep people safe. It just keeps them moving, and tired, and lonely. He looked her in the eyes. Maybe it's time to stop. The silence that followed wasn't cold. It was full. Miriam looked at him for a long time, then exhaled like she hadn't taken a real breath in days. I don't know if I remember how, she said quietly. You've already started, he said. You just don't see it yet. They didn't speak after that. Ruth rose quietly and took Micah's hand. They walked to the far side of the room and sat on the floor by the stove. Caleb came down the stairs a few minutes later, arms still in a sling, face pale but stronger. He poured hot tea without a word and handed Elias a cup. It wasn't just tea, it was peace in a small tin mug, the kind you could almost believe in. That night, they all ate together for the first time since the shooting. No one mentioned Co. No one asked about the men buried on the ridge. They just ate quietly, passing food down the line, steam rising in the dim firelight. It felt like something new, not perfect, but not broken either. The storm cleared by dawn, and the world beyond. Their door looked entirely different. The sky was pale gold, trees shimmered under their weight, and far off, where the hills rolled soft and wide toward the west, a single hawk turned slow circles above the clearing. It was the kind of day you didn't expect after blood, after fear, the kind of day that felt borrowed from another life. Elias sat on the porch, coat wrapped over his bandaged ribs, eyes fixed on the horizon. Miriam joined him after a while. You sure you're all right? She asked, still breathing. She smiled, then turned her face toward the hills. I found something, she said. While I was clearing Co's things, she handed him a small, leather-bound notebook, thin, worn with years. He opened it carefully. Names, dates, all written in the same precise hand. It was a ledger, a record, and Ruth's name was in it. Elias traced the entry with his fingertip. He kept track of her. Not just her. There are dozens of other names, places, farms, women. He felt his chest tighten. You think this proves what he did? I think it proves he had a system. Elias shut the book and stared across. The snow. This ledger, it's not just evidence, it's ammunition. For what? For making sure men like him don't do it again. Miriam looked down at her hands. What are you saying? I'm saying maybe we don't run, maybe we ride into Cheyenne. Find the man he was writing to. Use this. To do what? Burn it all down. She went still. Then slowly, she nodded. The choice was no longer whether to fight, but how. That afternoon, they packed what they needed, left the rest. By dusk, they were on the trail. Ruth rode with Miriam, Caleb with Elias, Micah curled tight, under the furs in the saddlebag, wide-eyed but quiet. They passed the ridge where the bodies were buried. Ruth didn't look. Miriam didn't flinch. And Elias, he didn't pray, but he remembered. He remembered the silence after Co fell, the way Ruth cried when she thought Elias was dying, the way Miriam pressed her hands to his chest, begging the blood to stop. He remembered it all, because that was the kind of thing you didn't get to forget. They made camp by a frozen stream, no fire, just blankets and each other. And sometime in the middle of the night, Elias heard Ruth whisper to Miriam, "Do you think he was ever kind to me?" Miriam didn't answer right away. But then she said, "You were kind enough for the both of you." The crumbs, wind howled once more. But the sound didn't feel so empty anymore. They were still running, yes. But now they were running towards something, and behind them, the ashes of what once was. The morning broke over hard frost and thin silence, every branch lined with delicate ice. Elias stood by the edge of the clearing, brushing down one of the horses. Caleb crouched nearby, trying to relace his boots with one good hand. The boy still moved gingerly, but his shoulders had stopped hunching every time Elias got near. That was progress, quiet and unspoken. Miriam emerged from the trees with water buckets sloshing against her legs. Her coat was 2 sizes too big. Elias's, but she wore it like she'd never owned another. Her face looked older in the pale light, older but not weaker. Something had hardened in her since the cabin. Not bitterness, purpose. They ate breakfast in near silence, dried apples, jerky, and a little coffee boiled thin over a smokeless fire. Ruth didn't speak much. She hadn't since they left. But she kept close to Elias, always just a step or 2 behind, like a shadow still deciding whether it trusted the sun. Micah clung to Miriam with both arms and one thumb in his mouth, though his eyes stayed fixed on Elias the whole time. They were halfway through packing when the dog started barking. It wasn't a frantic bark, just low, steady, alert. Elias's hand dropped to the revolver on his hip. The leather of his holster still felt foreign after so long without it. Miriam froze, eyes flicking to the trees. The dog barked again, then went quiet. Then, footsteps. Not heavy, but not hiding either. "Keep the kids low," Elias said, and moved toward the sound. A man stepped out from between the trees. He wasn't armed, or if he was, it wasn't obvious. Rough clothes, tall frame, grey hair pulled into a short tail, a rider's coat with one missing sleeve button and a silver badge pinned to the chest, dulled from weather and wear. "Marshal Grant Rourke," the man said before Elias could ask. Elias didn't lower the gun. "You alone?" "Would I be this? Stupid if I wasn't." Miriam stepped beside Elias. Her breath caught when she saw the badge. "You've been looking for us," she said. "I've been looking for the girl," Rourke corrected gently. "And the man who came after her, Charles Coe." "He's dead," Elias said. "I figured as much," the marshal replied. "The last telegraph we got out of Rivermouth said he'd gone after a child." Then everything went quiet. Storms, downed lines, bodies frozen to the posts. He stepped forward slowly. "I came to make sure the girl's alive, that's all." "She's alive," Miriam said. "But she doesn't belong to him. Or any of them." "No argument here," Rourke said. "But that ledger you've got, that changes things." Elias's eyes narrowed. "I've read Coe's handwriting before, in court testimonies, payment slips. I know what it looks like. Word in Cheyenne is, someone's got a book full of it." "You want it?" Elias asked. Rourke looked at him evenly. "I want it used right. There's a judge in Helena, one of the few left with a spine. If we get that ledger into her hands, A whole web of men like Co goes down with it. You expect us to just trust you? Miriam asked. No, I expect you to weigh the risk, and I expect you to decide whether you want Ruth looking over her shoulder her whole life. Because without that ledger being put to use, someone else will come after her. Maybe not tomorrow, maybe not next winter, but someday. Miriam glanced at Elias. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then slowly, he holstered the gun. We ride together then, Elias said. But you don't lead. We stay ahead. You follow. Rourke gave a slight nod. Fair enough. They rode out within the hour, heading north by northwest toward Helena. It was a quiet road, narrow, winding through ravines and past frozen creeks. The sky above like dull tin, and the snow deep enough to swallow the horses to the knee in places. They kept a tight pace, stopping only for water and fireless meals. Ruth stayed near Miriam, clutching the notebook tight to her chest at night. Caleb rode beside Elias when he could, learning how to read tracks, how to scan the hills, how to sense danger without looking for it directly. You think the judge will listen? Caleb asked one evening, voice low. She will, Elias said. She's lost her own to men like Co. How do you know? Because she's still on the bench. The next few days passed in a strange rhythm of silence and small lessons. How to bind a wound tight enough to stop blood, but not cut off flow. How to listen for different kinds of wind. How to sleep with one ear open and your boots beside your hand. They crossed into Montana territory by the fourth morning. The land opened wider there, the trees thinner, the cold even meaner, and that's where the trouble started. Rourke spotted the smoke first. Not theirs. Not a campfire. A signal. Thin, black, and twisting up from the horizon like a finger pointing. Straight at them. We're not the only ones out here, he muttered. Think it's someone looking for us? Miriam asked. Could be. Or it could be someone trying to warn us. They veered west, circling the plume. But by late afternoon the wind changed, and the smell of burned wood hit their noses. Then, the first body. A man hung upside down from a tree limb, his coat missing, and a crude mark carved into his chest, just a wide X and a circle around it. Caleb retched. Miriam pulled the kids closer. Rourke went pale. It's a gang sign, Northern Trail Cutters. Used to be just highwaymen. Now they run messages for bounty circles. You think there's a bounty? Elias asked. I think there will be, if word's gotten out about that ledger. Elias's jaw tightened. Then we stopped riding blind. That night, they took shelter in an abandoned hunting cabin. Boards broken, roof half caved, but good enough for cover. Ruth curled beside Micah, holding him like a mother instead of a sister, and Caleb took watch with Rourke. Elias and Miriam sat together by the broken window, watching shadows crawl across the snow. We can't let this go on forever, she whispered. Always dodging, always afraid. We won't, he said. But what if we don't make it to Helena? Then someone else carries the ledger. And Ruth. He looked at her. She's stronger than she knows. So was I, Miriam said, so quietly it barely reached him. And I still broke, Elias wanted to argue, but he didn't. He just placed his hand over hers, rough calloused fingers curling around hers gently. The next morning, they found another sign, a broken branch with a red ribbon tied to the end. Another message. They were being tracked, and not by lawmen. They're closing in, Rourke said. We need to move fast. They pushed harder, rode from dawn until dark, skipping rest stops, cutting across frozen lakes, crossing through ravines, where horses slipped and snow caved in, and still the signs kept appearing. Another ribbon, another fire, a fresh print in the snow that didn't belong to any of their boots. Until finally, they saw the riders. 4 of them. Far off. Black coats, pale horses, keeping distance, but not hiding. They want us to see them, Elias muttered. They want to wear us down, Rourke said. Get us too tired to run. We're already too tired, Miriam whispered. But not broken, Elias said. That night, they didn't stop. They rode through darkness, through sleet, through silence so sharp it cracked like glass. They reached. The canyon passed by sunrise. The riders were waiting. 4 shadows across the mouth of the trail. Elias pulled his horse up. Caleb froze. Miriam clutched Ruth against her. Micah started to cry. One of the riders stepped forward. Ledger, he said. Give it over, or the child dies first. Elias dismounted first, slowly, his hands in plain view, movements deliberate and calm like he was settling a horse that hadn't been broken yet. The riders at the mouth of the canyon didn't flinch. 4 men, each with a look that spoke of too many winters survived and too few lines crossed without blood. Their coats were dark, and their faces darker, weather-beaten, close-shaved, but not clean. Eyes scanning every motion, like wolves trying to decide which one to eat first. Behind, Elias? Miriam tightened her grip on Ruth, shielding the girl's body with her own, as if she could absorb a bullet if it came to that. Caleb took Micah down from the saddle and tried to hold the boy still, though Micah's little fingers kept twitching, his breath sharp and ragged. Rourke moved to the side slowly, hand resting on the butt of his rifle, eyes flicking between. The leader and the canyon wall, as if already measuring how many steps he'd need before he could draw. The leader stepped forward again, younger than the rest, but with the posture of someone used to killing first and asking after. A bandolier hung across his chest, knives in the front, shells in the back. A red tattoo ran down the side of his neck, just a mark, crude, like something done with a nail in a prison cell. The ledger, he said again. Now. What's in it to you? Elias asked, voice low. You're asking the wrong questions. The man's eyes flicked to Ruth. Ask what's going to happen to that girl if you don't. Elias stood still. So did everyone else. Then, Miriam stepped forward, slowly, carefully, like her body weighed twice as much as it used to. You want the ledger? She said, pulling it from the folds of her coat. Rourke hissed through his teeth. Miriam, Elias warned. But she kept going. She took 2 steps, then stopped, holding the book out like a priest offering communion. The leader's eyes narrowed, but he stepped forward, one hand extended. Another step, just 2 more paces between them, and then Ruth screamed, loud, piercing, not in fear, but in warning. The leader twisted, just in time to see Elias's hand come up from behind his coat. 1 shot! The man staggered back, hit square in the thigh, screaming as he crumpled. Chaos broke. Rourke fired next, rifle booming into the side of another rider's head, blowing him off his horse. Caleb grabbed Ruth and Micah and dove behind the boulders, shielding them with his back. Miriam ran, still clutching the ledger, ducking low as bullets cracked around her. The 3rd rider returned fire, hitting Rourke square in the shoulder and spinning him sideways, but not down. The last rider, a tall, quiet man with a scarred jaw, charged forward with a knife, straight at Elias. Elias sidestepped, grabbed the man's coat, and drove his head into the canyon wall. Once, twice. Then the knife dropped. A 3rd slam and the man crumpled. Silence. Smoke. Blood soaking into snow. Rourke was on his knees, coughing, teeth bared against the pain. I'm fine, he muttered, even though he wasn't. Elias checked the other bodies. Dead. All except the leader, who was moaning and swearing in the snow, his leg useless. Miriam stood still in the middle of the pass, her coat torn, the ledger pressed to her chest like a heartbeat. Are the kids okay? Elias asked. Caleb nodded. They're scared, but they're whole. Good, Elias said. He turned to Rourke. Can you ride? With a belt around my arm and someone steering, sure. Elias didn't smile. He walked to the downed leader, knelt beside him, and pressed the barrel of his revolver into the man's temple. The man went still. Wait, what's your name? Elias asked. What? You want to threaten a child? You give your name. Something for the judge to write down. The man swallowed. Riggs, Oliver Riggs. You alone? We were just 4. That's it. Word went out. $200 for the girl. More if she's breathing. Who put it out? Riggs hesitated. I don't know his name. Just saw the poster in Tullman's saloon. Said she's not to be brought to law, only back to the family. What family? No name. Just initials. J.C. Elias looked at Miriam. Her face had gone white. John Coe, she whispered. I thought he was dead, Elias said. He is, Rourke grunted from the rock, wrapping a scarf tight around his shoulder. Then someone else is trying to finish what he started, Elias said. And they're paying for blood. He stood, still staring at the man. Riggs looked up, eyes wide. You're not going to shoot me? No. He raised the pistol. You're going to bleed to death instead. The shot rang out, carving into the snow inches from Riggs' other leg. Unless you crawl your way to someone stupid enough to help you, they left him screaming behind them. The rest of the day was silent. Not from peace, from weight. Every hoofbeat sounded like a countdown. They reached a ranger's post by dusk, tucked into a stone ridge above a half-frozen river. Rourke was near unconscious by then. Elias and Miriam got him inside, wrapped him tight, cauterized the wound with a fire poker and whiskey while he screamed into a piece of bark. He'll live, Elias said afterward, hands shaking from the smell of burned flesh. But he won't. Be much good for riding, Miriam whispered. Then we stay here a night. Maybe 2. They'll come again. I know. That night, Caleb sat with Ruth and Micah by the fire. He told them stories, soft ones, made-up ones, about a mountain, where snow turned to candy and wolves danced when no one watched. Ruth didn't laugh, but she listened. Elias stood outside the cabin, staring at the trees. Miriam joined him. You think we'll make it? She asked. Not sure that's the question. What is? Whether it's worth it, even if we don't. She looked at him. And is it? He turned. Every second. The next morning brought fog thick enough to drown in, but it also brought visitors. Only one this time. An old man in a black hat and a carriage pulled by 2 mules, riding slow, waving a white kerchief like a truce. Elias watched from the porch. Miriam stood behind the curtain, her hand on Ruth's shoulder. The man stopped 15 paces out and climbed down. Name's Harlan Mott, he called. Trader, caravans, sometimes courier. Elias didn't answer. Mott pulled something from his pocket. A letter, from the judge in Helena, said if I crossed paths with you, I was to deliver it in person. Elias approached cautiously, took the letter, opened it. A single sheet. Elias Boone and party to receive safe escort. Verified intelligence source confirms ledger authenticity. Come fast. Trouble brews. Signed, Justice Althea Green. He read it twice. Then again. Then looked at Mott. She real. Real as frostbite. Got a bounty on her head herself, last I heard. But she's still benching. Still signing warrants no one else dares. Elias nodded. Mott tipped his hat. I got room in the wagon. Firewood. Blankets. If you're headed to Helena, I suggest we roll now. Elias glanced back at Miriam. She nodded, slow. By the hour's turn, they were loaded and moving again. Rourke stayed behind, arm in a sling, eyes hollow but proud. I'll buy you time, he said. And when I'm back on 2 legs, I'll bring the rest of that law with me. They rode west, toward Helena, toward the judge, toward the end of it all. But no one, not even Elias, knew just how twisted the road would get. The mule wagon rolled slow but steady across the valley floor, its wheels crunching thin crusts of snow and frozen weeds with every turn. Caleb sat in the back beside the children, arms around Ruth and Micah, keeping them blanketed beneath hides Harlan Mott had brought. He didn't speak much, just watch them breathe, watch their little hands stay tucked in tight, watched the sharp wind whip the world outside like punishment. Miriam rode up front beside Mott, silent at first, then asking questions only when the hush of the mountains grew too thick. "You run trade routes like this often?" "Used to," Mott said, keeping his eyes forward. "Before the town started burning and the names of lawmen began changing every spring." "You trust this judge?" "Green?" Mott shrugged. "No, but I respect her. She doesn't send letters like that unless she means something by 'em." Miriam looked back at Elias, who rode behind them on horseback. He hadn't spoken much since they left the outpost. He hadn't needed to. His eyes did the speaking for him now, always scanning, always narrowing, like the quiet around them wasn't silence, but the breath before a scream. By nightfall, they reached a ruined telegraph station, burned out. Black timbers left clawing at the sky like bones. Mott said nothing, just drove the wagon past, not even bothering to stop for shelter. "They did that last month," he finally muttered. "Used to be a message post between Helena and Bear Creek. Someone wanted it silent." "They?" Elias called ahead. Mott hesitated. "Folks with too much ink on their fingers and not enough blood. Lawyers, old landmen, the types that sell paper and call it justice." Elias rode up beside him. "And what does that have to do with us?" "Ledger you carry's dangerous." Mott flicked the reins. "Not because of what it says, but because someone thinks it's real. And when people believe a lie hard enough, they'll kill anyone who tries to prove otherwise." Ruth stirred in her sleep then, moaned soft, like a dream turned bad. Caleb hushed her gently, stroking her hair. "It's all right," he whispered. "We're all right." But they weren't, because someone was already waiting. The next ambush came with quiet footsteps and no warning, just the soft sound of snow slipping off trees and the whistle of something moving fast. A knife embedded into the side of the wagon. Then, a shout from the woods. Elias was off his horse in an instant, gun drawn. Caleb shoved Ruth and Micah down behind the supply crates. Mott ducked. Miriam reached for her rifle, but froze when the shape stepped out of the trees. He was tall, pale-skinned, wearing no coat, just a blood-stained shirt and a vest with silver buttons glinting in the moonlight. His hair was dark, jaw unshaven, and, his right eye milky white, blind but watching, a scar curved from his temple to his collarbone. "Miriam Coe," he said, voice smooth as oil. "You always did ride in style." Miriam stood, rifle now steady. "Your name?" He smiled. "Isaac Voss." Caleb looked up. "That name's in the ledger." "I should hope so," Isaac said, stepping closer, hands spread like he came in peace. "I paid plenty for the ink." "You worked for John Coe," Miriam said, voice shaking. "You helped forge deeds. You blackmailed towns into selling their water rights." "True enough, but I was also his bookkeeper, and that means I know what's in your hands isn't the full story." "We have enough," Elias said. "You think so?" Isaac chuckled. "Then why'd the judge send for you instead of sending someone to collect it herself?" Elias took a step forward, gun raised. "Why are you really here?" Isaac's smile dropped. "To stop you. Not because of the book, but because of the girl." He looked at Ruth, and the blood in Miriam's face drained away. "You think you're protecting her," Isaac said. "But you don't know what she is, who she's tied to, why men will bleed just to keep her from reaching Helena." "She's a child," Miriam snapped. "She's my daughter." "She's more than that, and if you don't give her up, if you don't turn around and burn that book, then you're going to learn what it means to be hunted by ghosts with badges and sins older than this territory." "Then let 'em come," Elias said. "I've killed worse things than ghosts." Isaac's eye twitched. Then he drew, fast, but not faster than Elias. 2 shots cracked. One grazed Elias's side, the other hit Isaac in the chest. He staggered, gasped, looked down at the blood blooming from his shirt like a rose opening in winter. "You think you've won," he rasped, "but the story don't end with me." Then he fell, hard, dead before the snow could catch him. Miriam stood frozen. Elias lowered his gun slowly, looking back at Ruth. The girl stared wide-eyed, trembling, clinging to Caleb's coat. "You all right?" Elias asked. She nodded, but it was a lie. They buried Isaac beneath a pine tree before sunrise. No prayers, no cross. Just silence and a heap of stones. And when they rode again, no one spoke for miles. It wasn't until the last ridge before Helena that they saw smoke, not from a fire, but from chimneys, civilization, a town, a promise of law. But it wasn't safe. Not yet. At the edge of the hill, Elias stopped and signaled them to stay low. He scanned the horizon with a brass spyglass, then stiffened. "Blockade," he said. Mott climbed up beside him. "Where?" "There, Southern Road. 2 wagons turned sideways, 3 riders, all armed. Martial colors?" "No. Private." Miriam squinted. "You think they know we're coming? They're waiting for someone. If not us, then someone like us." Mott scratched his beard. "We could try the river pass. Rough terrain, but it wraps around." "Too slow," Elias muttered. Caleb stepped forward. "What if I go down alone?" "No," Miriam snapped. "You're not." "I'll be just a boy, delivering a message, asking for help. They won't think twice." "It's too dangerous," Elias said. Caleb looked at him. "So is standing here while Ruth runs out of time. That silenced them." Elias looked to Ruth, then to Miriam. Finally, he nodded. Caleb rode down with a white flag tied to his saddle horn. He kept his head down, shoulders hunched like he was smaller than he really was. The men at the blockade watched him come. Then they waved him forward. He passed the first wagon, spoke to the man with the revolver, handed him something. A letter. The man read it, then looked up and smiled, not kindly. He nodded, then reached into his coat, and Caleb ran. Hard. Shots rang out. The horse screamed and bucked, throwing Caleb into the snow. Elias didn't hesitate. He spurred his own horse into a gallop, shouting to Mott, "Drive now!" Mott cracked the reins, and the mule wagon surged forward, careening down the slope. Elias reached Caleb and pulled him up just as bullets ripped through the brush. One grazed the boy's leg, another tore Elias's coat. They rode hard, flanking the road, using trees for cover. Miriam fired from the wagon, shooting wild but buying space. The blockade broke. 3 riders gave chase. Elias threw Caleb into the back of the wagon. "Stay down!" Then he wheeled and rode straight at the first pursuer. The 2 horses slammed past each other. Elias fired point blank. 1 man dropped. He spun back, lined up a second, missed. The 3rd caught him off guard, tackled him off his horse. They hit the ground hard, fists flying. The man pulled a knife. Elias caught his wrist, but the blade sliced. His palm, blood sprayed. Then Miriam appeared. Rifle stock cracked across the man's skull. He dropped. Elias gasped. "I had that," he muttered. "You're bleeding. You should see the other guy." Back at the wagon, Mott had veered onto a narrow path that led behind the outer rim of Helena, a mining trail, mostly abandoned. They reached the edge of the city by dusk. Smoke rose from chimneys. Church bells rang in the distance, and men in uniforms, real ones, rode out to meet them, not with guns, with lanterns. "Judge Green sent us," one said. "Said you'd be coming." Elias collapsed off his horse. Miriam followed, clutching Ruth tight. They had made it, but Helena was not safety. It was reckoning, because waiting in the courthouse was the final piece of the story, a name they hadn't spoken in years, and secrets even the ledger didn't hold. They didn't open the courthouse doors for them. They swung them open. Judge Evelyn Green stood at the top of the wide stone steps, with her hands clasped in front of her and a row of guards behind her. Not lawmen, not soldiers, but volunteers. From the territory, all bearing the signs of old scars and colder winters. She wore no robes, no medals of station, just a heavy shawl against the wind and an expression like weathered granite. Miriam stepped forward with Ruth's hand in hers. Caleb walked beside them, his limp visible now, though he never said a word about it. Elias stayed slightly behind, one hand wrapped in blood-soaked cloth, the other resting on the butt of his revolver. Not as a threat, but a habit, the same way some men touch a scar when they're in pain. Harlan Mott stayed with the wagon, watching the guards but saying nothing. The doors shut behind them with a sound like judgment itself. The interior of the courthouse was warmer than expected, lamplight glinting off polished floors, a fire already burning in the great stone hearth at the end of the room, but Miriam didn't let the warmth deceive her. This place didn't feel safe. It felt like the moment just before a noose goes taut. "You brought the ledger?" Judge Green asked. Miriam didn't answer. Elias pulled it from his coat and set it down on the long table in the center of the chamber. Green approached it slowly, opened the leather flap, and skimmed the pages with her fingers, not reading, just feeling. Cohenridge deeds, Eden Hollow's false annexations, Widow Weiler's land, even the forged death certificates from Hollow Pass. She looked up. "You realize what happens if this is real?" "It is real," Elias said. Green didn't argue. Instead, she turned to Ruth. The girl shrank behind Miriam's skirt. "Who's your father?" Green asked, voice softer now. Ruth looked at Miriam, and Miriam knelt. "Go ahead," she whispered. "You tell her." Ruth took a breath. "My papa's name was—" Her voice cracked. "John Coe." The room stilled. Even the fire stopped crackling. Green's jaw tightened, but she nodded slowly. "Then I'm glad you came." Elias stepped forward. "She doesn't carry the sins of her blood." "No, but plenty of people will try to pin them on her anyway," Green said. "You're not the only ones who know she exists." "She has nothing to do with his crimes," Miriam snapped. "But she has his name," Green said, "and that's enough for the families who lost everything." She was 2 when he died. She doesn't even remember him. That won't matter to them. Green opened a drawer, pulled out a folded map, and laid it on the table. "There are 3 settlements where the worst of the fraud took place. If we move fast, we can start restitution processes before word spreads. If we don't, they'll come for her," Elias finished. "Not just her. All of you." Ruth's lip trembled. Miriam crouched beside her again. "No one's taking you. Not while I breathe." "Then you'll have to stay awake a long time," Green said, not cruelly, just honest. "Because bounty riders already passed through here last week. They asked questions about a woman with 3 children, a man who walks like he carries old guilt, and a boy with a birthmark on his cheek." Caleb instinctively touched his face. "They were looking for you," Green finished. "Someone hired them. A name not in the ledger." "Who?" Elias asked. Green hesitated. "Cora Gresham." Miriam felt the name like a slap. "That's not possible," she whispered. She died." "No," Green said. "She went underground, changed her name. Now she owns a bank in Harvest Hollow. She's financing the men who burned those outposts." "She was his sister," Miriam murmured. "John's older sister. She taught him how to lie." "She taught a lot of men how to lie," Green said. "And she's not finished." The fire cracked again, as if the hearth itself knew something had shifted. "She's going to try to reclaim the land," Green said. "Every inch her brother lost, including the child." Ruth's voice was barely a whisper. "Why would she? Want me?" "Because you're the last piece," Green said. "The final thread tying the co-name to all of it. If she can claim you, she can rewrite the past. Say you were raised in her care, that you approve of her claims. It won't matter, that you're a child. Perception is more powerful than truth when money's involved." Elias looked at the ledger, then at the map. Then we take the truth to the people, he said. We ride to those towns and tell them ourselves. You won't make it far, Green said. She'll expect that. She has men watching every road. Then we ride where she won't expect. Miriam stood. We go through Eden Hollow. Green turned sharply. That town was abandoned 5 years ago. All the better, Elias said. You'll freeze. We've survived worse. Green closed the ledger. If you're going, take this. She handed Elias a letter sealed in blue wax. It's my mark. Proof I sanctioned your travel. It might keep a few doors open. And if it doesn't, Miriam asked, then run faster than the people behind you. They rode out at nightfall. No lights, no trail, just a silent wagon, 2 horses, and 4 hearts pounding louder than hooves. Eden Hollow sat in a deep basin of hills, long since swallowed by frost and neglect. Buildings leaned inward, their roofs half collapsed, doors hanging from one hinge or none at all. The church steeple had fallen, but the bell lay intact on the ground beside it. They hid the wagon in the ruins of the old livery. Set camp in the chapel, but sleep didn't come, because Miriam knew something was wrong. The moment the wind shifted, she knew. Smoke, Elias said. Too close. They doused the fire, covered Ruth and the boys in the cellar beneath the altar, then waited. It didn't take long. A footstep, then another, then the unmistakable click of a rifle bolt. Miriam didn't move. She just said, You travelled far for a child. And Cora Gresham stepped into the doorway. Time hadn't touched her much. Her hair was white, but her spine straight as ever. She wore fine wool, no coat, no gloves. Her hands were bare. Cold didn't touch her, just like conscience. Never had. She's not just a child, Cora said. She's an heir. She's my daughter. No, she was never yours. John never married you. He never married anyone, and yet his blood survives. Elias raised his gun. Step outside. Cora didn't even blink. I have 30 men with me. You'll kill 2 before they kill all of you. You're lying, Miriam said. I never lie, Cora said. I let others do that for me. The silence cracked. Then a voice shouted from outside. A man. Rough. Desperate. Mom, they're gone. Cora's eyes darkened. She turned slowly to Miriam. You sent them ahead. They left before you arrived, Miriam said. Harlan took them through Raven's Hollow. There's no pass through Raven's Hollow. There is if you know where to look. Cora's nostrils flared. Then you've just killed them. No, Elias said. You have, because they're running from you. Cora leveled her eyes at him. You think she'll grow up safe? That the world forgets so easily? No, Miriam said. But Ruth will grow up free, not as your puppet, not as your bloodline. Mine. She raised her gun. But Cora was faster, or would have been, if the bell hadn't rung, loud, shattering. The old church bell, struck from behind, by a boy's small hand. Ruth stood behind it, hair wild, eyes fierce. The echo froze Cora's hand, and Elias shot her. Once. Through the shoulder, she screamed, dropped the pistol. Miriam kicked it away. Leave, she said, and tell your men to ride with you, because if you're here when the sun rises. She didn't finish. She didn't have to. Cora stumbled out the door, clutching her wound, and vanished into the night. They didn't chase her. There was no need. Some ghosts walk out just so they can die somewhere colder. Miriam collapsed to her knees, arms around Ruth, holding her tighter than ever. You did it, she whispered. Ruth just nodded, but the tears in her eyes were not fear anymore. They were release, and outside, the wind began to carry something new. Not snow, not smoke, but the sound of hooves. From the south, a rider approaching, not an enemy, not this time, but a messenger, from Helena, bearing the seal of Judge Green, with news that would change everything. The messenger's horse was lathered with sweat, nostrils flared like bellows, steam rising from its neck in the cold dawn air. He barely managed to dismount before he fell to his knees, one gloved hand clutching the sealed letter like it was fused to his skin. His lips were cracked, eyes bloodshot, coat torn at the shoulder. Elias caught him before he hit the ground. "Easy!" The man shoved the letter into his chest. "Judge Green. She told me, ride through the night. Ride like hell was behind me." I did. Miriam took the envelope while Elias helped the man sit. The blue wax was still intact, though snow had dampened the edges. She broke it with her thumb and unfolded the parchment inside. Her eyes moved fast across the ink. Once, twice, then a third time. "What is it?" Elias asked. Miriam looked up slowly. She did it. Did what? She filed an emergency order under martial witness protection. Her voice shook. "Ruth is no longer recognized under John Coe's lineage. She's under my guardianship, legally." Elias stared at her. "That means she can't be claimed. Not by blood. Not by money. Not by anyone." The messenger coughed behind them, but even in his pain, he was smiling. "There's more. Judge Green, she sent riders to the 3 towns, Raven Hollow, Eden Hollow, Hollow Pass. She showed them the ledger, the evidence, the names, everything. And they're forming a tribunal, not under the territory, under the people. They want to speak to you, Elias, Miriam, Harlan too. You're not just survivors now. You're witnesses." Caleb and Isaac peeked from the church cellar door. Ruth stood behind them, arms crossed tightly over her chest, as if she hadn't quite dared to believe anything was safe yet. Elias knelt beside her. "You're free now, Ruth." She didn't smile. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "Does that mean we stop running?" Miriam pulled her into her arms. "Yes." But Elias looked past them, to the eastern ridge, where light was cresting, over the hilltops like a slow awakening. The wind was different now, not biting, not cruel, but still laced with something that felt like waiting. "Maybe not," he said. "Not yet." Because even if the tribunal stood, even if the towns believed them, there was still the matter of Cora Gresham. No one knew where she'd gone. No bodies had been found, and the kind of woman who survived that long by lies didn't. Vanished just because she lost. "She's a root system," Elias muttered to himself. "You can cut the tree, burn the trunk, but unless you pull the root, it'll grow again." Miriam looked up. "What are you saying?" "I'm saying if we want Ruth safe for good, we finish this." He didn't wait for argument. Not this time, because the church wasn't theirs to hide in forever, and Ruth wasn't meant to live like a shadow. They broke camp that morning. With the ledger tucked inside Miriam's coat, the tribunal request, in Elias's hands, and Harlan leading the way with a rifle strapped across his back, they headed east, not toward Helena, not toward any courthouse or town meeting, but toward Havers Hollow, toward the place where Cora Gresham had buried her past and built her throne. The journey took 3 days, each night colder than the last, each mile harder to cross than the one before. But none of them complained. Not the children, not Harlan, not even Elias, whose limp had worsened. Because now the cold wasn't an enemy. It was just proof they were moving. Havers Hollow rose from the plains like a lie told beautifully. Clean fences, fresh paint, straight roads, every building whitewashed, every sign straight and hand-lettered in gold and navy. People nodded as they passed. They smiled with their teeth, but their eyes were sharp and their doors shut faster than wind. "They know we don't belong," Harlan muttered. "No," Elias said. "They know exactly who we are. They're just wondering why we're still breathing." The bank sat in the town centre, taller than any other structure. Columns, marble floors, gas lamps. A dome above it with a copper eagle that caught the morning light and blinded anyone who looked up too long. They entered without knocking. No guards tried to stop them. No tellers spoke, because Cora Gresham was already waiting. sitting behind her, desk like she hadn't been shot, bandage on her shoulder, gloves on both hands, and that same smile that never quite reached her eyes. "Would you like tea?" she asked. Miriam stepped forward. "I want your confession." "I'm afraid we're fresh out of those today." Elias dropped the ledger on her desk. She didn't flinch. "You really think that will undo what I've built?" "It's not about undoing. It's about exposing." She leaned back. "Let me guess. You think the tribunal will arrest me, haul me from this office in chains?" "No," Harlan said. "I think they'll watch you burn it down yourself. Once your investors hear what's inside that ledger, your whole house of cards folds." "Please," Cora scoffed. "I am the investors. I own the land, the banks, the ink that prints the contracts. You think truth is enough?" "It doesn't have to be," Miriam said. "We have something stronger." "Oh?" Her. Miriam turned, and Ruth stepped forward from behind her. Cora blinked. For the first time, doubt. Ruth didn't speak. She didn't need to. She just walked to the desk, reached into her coat, and pulled out something she hadn't shown anyone yet. Not even Miriam. It was her father's pocket watch, the only thing she had left of him. She laid it on the desk and said, "He gave me lies, but I'm giving you the truth. Your name doesn't own me anymore." Cora's face flickered. Not rage, not even pain, but fear. Not of Ruth. Of what she represented, the child she couldn't erase, the future she couldn't control. Elias leaned in close. "You wanted her to carry the legacy. You wanted to use her to write your version of the past, but she's not yours." "She never was," Miriam whispered, and Cora said nothing, because there was nothing left to say. Later, the tribunal gathered in Eden Hollow, where the people had begun rebuilding, not homes, but trust. Miriam stood on the steps of the old church, ledger in hand, and read every name, every stolen parcel, every forged signature. She didn't falter. Elias stood beside her, Ruth and her brothers in front. When it was over, they passed the ledger to the council. Not to bury it, but to keep it open, a record of what had been and what could never be again. Cora Gresham vanished. Her bank folded 2 months later. The territories didn't fall apart, but something inside them changed. Not because of violence, not because of revenge, because of truth, and the people who chose to stand in it. Miriam bought a small plot outside Raven Hollow, built a house with wide windows and warm floors. Elias helped, despite his limp. Harlan stayed long enough to see the roof finished, then rode west with a note in his coat that simply read, "When you're safe, I'll stop running too." Ruth planted flowers in the yard. Caleb built a wooden swing. Isaac learned to read, then write, then draw stories on the inside covers of old books. And one morning, as frost still glittered on the fields, Ruth sat beside Miriam and whispered, "I think I want to keep his name, not because it's his, but because I'm going to make it mean something else." Miriam nodded, and Elias from the porch said, "Then let it begin." And the wind blew through the hollows, not as a warning anymore, but as a blessing.